The blue Ethernet cable under the living room rug was still warm when I touched it, and my stomach dropped as I stayed quiet and smiled like nothing was wrong. Who was plugging into our home network at night? And why did my name keep showing up on the alerts? I am Lorelai, 27, and I work as a remote billing specialist for a healthcare company. Back then, I was living at my family's house to save money and rebuild after a rough breakup. It was supposed to be temporary. A few months, quiet, safe, normal. It was none of those things. My younger brother, Sterling, had a talent for turning the whole house into his personal stage. He wasn't just gaming. He was streaming. Loud, performative, always chasing attention like oxygen. He'd stay up into the early hours, talking to strangers like they were his best friends, laughing too hard, shouting over fake hype, and narrating everything like a sports announcer. I tried to be patient. I really did. But my job required clean internet, steady calls, and focus. And my boss was the kind of person who said things like, "We're all replaceable," with a smile that never reached her eyes. So when my video calls started freezing, when client files failed to upload, when my headset crackled like someone was chewing foil into a microphone, I blamed the provider. I blamed my laptop. I blamed stress. Then the first warning popped up. A text from our internet company, new device connected. I stared at it in bed, blinking. I hadn't added anything. My parents were asleep. Sterling was upstairs talking too loud as usual. Another text, password changed. My chest tightened. I opened the provider app, hands suddenly shaky. It showed a login from a device I didn't recognize. The location was listed as home. So someone in the house. I got up, barefoot, moving quietly down the hallway like I was sneaking into my own life. Sterling's door was cracked. I could hear him laughing, performing, feeding his audience. I could also hear something else, a second voice. Not in his headset. In the room. A low murmur, like someone sitting close. I stopped, heart tapping hard against my ribs. And I hated myself for thinking what I thought. I hated how fast my brain went there. I pushed the door open just enough to see. Sterling sat at his desk with two monitors glowing. A ring light pointed at his face. A microphone on an arm stand. And behind his chair, crouched on the floor like a guilty shadow, was his friend from school, holding a laptop. Sterling didn't even flinch at the sight of me. He just lifted one finger, that universal sign for wait, like I was the one interrupting something important. I waited, quiet, burning. His friend looked up, eyes wide like a raccoon caught in the trash. Sterling finally said, still smiling at his screen, "Can you not right now?" "Not right now," I whispered because my throat felt too tight to speak normally. "My calls keep dropping. My job is on the line." He rolled his eyes like I was being dramatic. "It's fine. It's just internet. It's my paycheck," I said, trying to keep my voice even, trying to be the adult in a house that suddenly felt like a daycare. He leaned back in his chair, still streaming, and said loud enough for his audience, "My sister is doing that thing again." His chat, I guess, must have eaten it up. He smirked at the screen like he'd just landed a joke. I looked at the laptop in his friend's hands. The screen flashed lines of text. Not a game, not homework, something technical. "What is that?" I asked. Sterling waved a hand. "Relax, it's just a tool." "A tool for what?" His friend's mouth opened, then closed. Sterling's smile stayed glued on. "Lorelai," he said, voice sweet, fake, dangerous, "go to bed. You're embarrassing yourself." Something in me went cold. Not angry, not loud, just cold. So I nodded. I said, "Okay," and I walked away. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to Sterling's laughter drift through the vents, and I opened every app I had. Provider account, router page, device list, old emails, password resets. The next morning, while Sterling slept like a baby who'd never worried about consequences, I went into the living room and sat on the floor near the TV stand. That's when I found it. A thin Ethernet cable snaked from the router, disappeared under the rug, and reappeared near the wall like it was trying to hide. I followed it with my fingers until I reached a small black box taped behind the console cabinet. A splitter, cheap, improvised, like someone had built a secret doorway into our connection. I didn't rip it out. I didn't storm upstairs. I didn't tell my parents, not yet. I took a photo, then another, closer. Then I filmed a slow video, panning from the router lights to the cable to the little box. I made sure the timestamp showed on my phone screen reflection in the glass. Then I logged into the provider app again. New device connected. New device connected. New device connected. My skin prickled. A lot of devices. Too many for our house. I clicked details and stared at the names. They weren't Sterling's PlayStation or Mom's iPad. They were things like unknown Android, laptop, cam. I swallowed. I checked the security section. There were admin settings I didn't recognize. Remote access enabled. Port forwarding rules added. A guest network I had never created. Named something smug, like it was a joke. And then I saw it. A billing change request pending. My hands went numb. I opened it. The request wasn't to upgrade speed. It was to add an add-on service. A business tier feature. More expensive. A lot more. I stared at the amount like it would change if I blinked hard enough. Sterling didn't just mess with the internet. He was trying to turn our house into something else. Something that made money. Or something that hid money. I sat there on the carpet, not breathing right, and suddenly I remembered little things from the past few weeks. Sterling's new friends coming over late, the way he'd keep one ear open whenever I said anything about my job, the way he'd ask, too casually, "Your work uses like secure logins, right?" At the time, I'd laughed it off. Now I felt sick. I didn't confront him. I didn't accuse him. I did what I always did when fear showed up in my throat. I got quiet. I started collecting. Every morning, I took screenshots of the device list. I copied the strange device addresses into a notes app. I saved the login history. I turned on notifications for every change. I set up a separate network for myself. Hidden. With a password Sterling wouldn't guess. I named it something boring like printer setup so it wouldn't tempt him. Then I waited, and he got comfortable. Sterling loved being comfortable. He loved feeling smarter than everyone else. He loved the way my parents still saw him as a kid, while I was the responsible one who could take a hit. A few days later, he cornered me in the kitchen while I was making coffee. He leaned against the counter like a sitcom character. By the way, he said casual, if you notice the internet being weird, it's because we're testing stuff. I asked, keeping my face blank. He smiled. Me and my guys, I stirred sugar into my cup slowly, letting the spoon clink. Testing what? He shrugged. Nothing, just upgrades. I nodded like I believed him. Okay. He watched me for a second like he wanted a reaction, like he needed me to be upset so he could feed off it. When I didn't give him that, he got bored and walked away. My phone buzzed a moment later. Password changed. I almost laughed. Almost. Because the audacity was so childish, it was ridiculous. But then another notification came in. New login from unknown device. My stomach twisted again. That night, I did something Sterling would never expect from me. I called the provider's fraud department. I didn't say my brother's name. I didn't accuse. I asked one small question, calm and polite, like I was just trying to understand. Can you tell me? I said, voice steady. Why the admin account has remote access enabled when I never turned that on? The agent paused. Ma'am, remote access was enabled weeks ago. Weeks? I kept my voice soft. Can you see what device did it? Yes, she said slowly, like she was reading something she didn't want to read out loud. It appears to be a laptop connected by Ethernet. Ethernet. My fingers tightened around my phone. Can you see any unusual activity? There was another pause. Then, ma'am, I'm seeing repeated connections to external servers, and the amount of traffic is very high. I swallowed. High like streaming? High like commercial usage, she replied. Or routing. That word landed like a stone in my chest. I thanked her. I ended the call. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at nothing, hearing Sterling upstairs, laughing into his microphone like he owned the world. I opened my banking app because my instincts were screaming now. There it was, a pending verification email in my inbox from a loan company I had never used. My name, my email, a request for identity confirmation. I didn't scream. I didn't run upstairs. I didn't wake my parents. I just sat there silent, and I felt something break inside me in the most careful way. Quick real-life pause. When I'm editing these late at night, I get tired, and your comments are what keep me going. Hit like, subscribe, and tell me your city, state, or country. All right, now let me take you back. The next morning, I did my makeup like normal. I smiled at my mom. I asked my dad about his day. I acted so normal it almost scared me. Then I waited for Sterling to come downstairs. He strolled in around late morning, hoodie on, hair messy, smug in that way boys get when they think they're untouchable. He opened the fridge and started eating leftovers straight from the container. I leaned against the counter and said lightly, "Hey, did you use my email for anything?" He didn't even look up. No. I repeated, like I was just making conversation. He finally glanced at me annoyed. Why would I? I held my phone in my hand, screen dark. Because I got a verification email from a loan company. His jaw moved slowly as he chewed. Probably spam. I nodded. Yeah, probably. He relaxed instantly. The lie slid right off him. He went back to eating like that was the end of it. And that's when I knew. If I confronted him loudly, he'd deny. He'd twist it. He'd make my parents feel sorry for him. He'd call me paranoid. He'd delete whatever he needed to delete. So I did the opposite. I gave him more rope. That afternoon, I went to a small electronics store and bought a tiny network camera. Nothing fancy. Cheap enough to look harmless. I also bought a plain storage box from a dollar store, the kind you'd keep old chargers in. That night, when everyone was asleep, I placed the camera inside the box with a small hole facing the router cabinet. I angled it so it could see the Ethernet port area and that taped little splitter. Then I went back to bed and waited, listening to Sterling's footsteps upstairs like distant thunder. In the early hours, my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I opened the feed. A hand reached into the cabinet, a hand that wasn't my dad's. Not my mom's, Sterling's hand. He unplugged something, plugged something else in, and for a second the camera caught the screen of a laptop nearby. Lines of text, a dashboard, a list of connected devices. And right there, in the corner, was my full name typed into a field like it belonged to him. I covered my mouth with my palm to keep from making a sound, because in that moment, I realized the internet wasn't the real problem. I was the product. I watched that grainy little feed until my eyes felt dry and swollen. My fingertips were cold even though my room was warm. The camera caught Sterling moving like he belonged in shadows, calm and practiced, like this was routine. He didn't look guilty. He looked confident. I set my phone down and I just sat there listening. Upstairs, his laugh burst out, then stopped, like he'd muted his mic. A chair scraped. A door clicked. Soft footsteps crossed the hallway. Then everything went quiet again. The kind of quiet that means someone thinks they're safe. My first instinct was to run to my parents, to shake them awake, to say he's doing something. He's using my name. But I could already picture it. My mom's confusion, my dad's tired sigh, the way they'd want to believe it was a misunderstanding because that hurt less than admitting their son had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. And then there was Sterling himself. If he realized I knew, he'd do what he always did when he was cornered. He'd get charming. He'd get loud. He'd turn it into a joke. He'd flip it onto me until I started sounding crazy, even to myself. So I did the hardest thing. I stayed quiet. I opened my notes app and wrote down everything I needed to remember. I wrote the time in words. I wrote what he unplugged and what he plugged in. I wrote the name field I saw. I wrote the way his hand didn't shake. Like he'd done this 100 times. Then I did something that felt almost cruel. I went back to sleep. Not because I was calm, not because I wasn't scared, but because I wanted him to think the house was still his playground. I wanted him comfortable. I wanted him sloppy. In the morning, my mom was in the kitchen, humming softly as she packed my dad's lunch. She looked so normal, so safe that it made my throat burn. Sterling came downstairs like nothing happened. He wore that same hoodie. He poured cereal and scrolled on his phone with one hand. His eyes flicked up at me, and for a second I thought I saw something, a tiny crack like he was checking whether I'd changed. But then he smiled, lazy and smug. "Morning," he said. I forced my face to match his casual tone. "Morning." My mom asked him if he'd slept. He lied without blinking. My dad asked if the internet was acting weird again. Sterling shrugged like the whole world was annoying him. And I stood there stirring my coffee, listening to them talk around the truth like it was a piece of furniture we all pretended not to see. After my parents left, I locked myself in my room and called my bank. I didn't accuse Sterling. I didn't say my brother. I said the only thing that mattered. "I think my identity is being used," I told the representative. Voice steady. "I need to lock everything down." The representative asked questions. She used a calm tone that made me feel like I could breathe. She helped me freeze my credit and set alerts. She walked me through changing my passwords and setting up extra verification. My hands shook the whole time, but my voice stayed level. I was proud of myself for that in a small way. When the call ended, I sat on my bed and stared at the wall. The fear was still there, but now it had borders. Now it had shape. That afternoon, I reached out to the only person I trusted to keep her mouth shut. My coworker, Greer. She was the kind of woman who never raised her voice, never panicked, and never let anyone see her sweat. She'd once told me quietly that her ex had tried to ruin her credit, and she'd handled it with paperwork and patience until he ran out of lies. I texted her and asked if she could talk. When she answered, she didn't waste time. "Tell me what's happening." So I did. I told her about the warnings, the password changes, the Ethernet cable, the camera footage. I told her about the loan email. I told her about seeing my name on a screen that wasn't mine. Greer went silent for a moment, then she said, "Okay, you're going to do this the right way." "I don't even know what the right way is," I admitted, my voice cracking for the first time all day. "I feel like I'm standing in quicksand." "You're not," she replied. "You're standing on evidence, and evidence doesn't care who's charming." That line stuck to me like glue. Greer told me to document everything and to stop trying to fix it alone. She told me to call the provider again and request an official technician. She told me to file a report even if I felt sick doing it. Because if a loan was attempted in my name, silence could become consent in the wrong hands. I swallowed hard. "It's my brother." "Then it's your brother," she said, calm as stone. "And you'll still do it right." After I hung up, I sat with my phone in my lap and listened to Sterling's voice upstairs. Loud again, playful, like he didn't have a shadow attached to him. I called the provider and scheduled a technician visit for the next day. I chose a time when my parents would be home, not because I wanted to expose Sterling in front of them, but because I wanted witnesses. I wanted an adult professional voice in the room, so it couldn't be spun into me being dramatic. That night, I didn't sleep much. I checked the camera feed again and again. I watched my own fear like it was a movie I couldn't turn off. Sterling went into the cabinet twice, always in the quiet hours, always with that same confident hand, and once he wasn't alone. A second person entered the frame, tall, hoodie, face angled away, but when he leaned down, the camera caught his profile for a moment. Sharp jaw, a small scar near his eyebrow. I recognized him from a photo on Sterling's social media. Wilder, Sterling's friend. My stomach dropped, not because I was relieved it wasn't just Sterling, but because it meant there were more hands in this than I'd thought. More minds, more excuses. And then right before they left the cabinet, I saw Wilder point at the router and laugh. Sterling laughed back, like this was fun. The next day, the technician arrived. He was polite, middle-aged, and he smelled like laundry detergent and engine oil. My parents stood in the living room with him, anxious and confused. Sterling lingered at the top of the stairs, pretending not to care, but his eyes were bright and watchful. The technician asked who managed the internet account. My dad pointed at me. "She uses it for work." I felt my cheeks heat. The responsibility sat heavy in my chest, like a weight Sterling had placed there on purpose. The technician knelt by the router cabinet. He looked at the cables for only a few seconds before his expression changed. "Huh," he murmured. My mom leaned forward. "What?" He didn't answer right away. He gently pulled the rug back and followed the Ethernet cable. Then he reached behind the cabinet and his fingers found the taped splitter. He stared at it like it offended him. "Did you install this?" he asked. My dad blinked. "Install what?" Sterling's voice floated down the stairs, too casual. "It's probably just for better signal." The technician glanced up. "Better signal doesn't require a splitter like this." Sterling shrugged. "I don't know. I didn't do it." My heart pounded. I wanted to look at my parents and tell them everything. I wanted to scream that I'd been awake at night watching his hands, but I didn't. Not yet. I kept my face blank and said softly, "I didn't put it there." The technician removed the tape, unplugged the splitter, and inspected the connections. "Someone's been piggybacking this router. There are also remote settings enabled that shouldn't be enabled on a home line." My mom's hand flew to her mouth. My dad frowned hard, like he was trying to solve a puzzle he didn't want to see completed. Sterling laughed, sharp and forced. "So what, someone hacked us?" The technician stood up and dusted his hands. "Hackers don't usually run cables under rugs. This was done from inside the house." Sterling's smile faltered for half a second. My dad looked up at him. "Sterling!" He threw his hands up. "What? Why are you looking at me?" "I'm not accusing you," my dad said, but his tone had changed. It was heavier now. "I'm asking you if you know anything." Sterling scoffed. "No, I don't." He turned and went upstairs. Angry footsteps loud on the stairs. He didn't slam his door, which told me something. Sterling slammed doors when he was innocent and theatrical. When he was guilty, he moved carefully. The technician reset the router settings and disabled remote access. He changed the admin login and created a new secure password. He handed it to my dad on a piece of paper. My dad thanked him. My mom looked shaken, and Sterling stayed upstairs, silent. When the technician left, my parents sat at the kitchen table like they'd aged a year in an hour. My mom asked me if my work would be okay now. My dad asked if I'd lost money. I wanted to tell them about the loan email. I wanted to show them the video, but my throat felt locked. Because as much as I wanted justice, I didn't want to be the one to rip our family open at the seams. So I said, I'm handling it. That night, Sterling knocked on my bedroom door. He didn't come in at first. He stood in the doorway, eyes narrowed, like he was trying to measure how much I knew without asking. You told Dad you didn't put that cable there, he said. I sat on my bed with my laptop closed, my phone face down, acting calm, because I didn't. He stepped inside, slow. So you think I did? I didn't say that, I replied. He laughed, but it wasn't funny. You always do this. You act innocent and everyone thinks you're the victim. My nails dug into my palm under the blanket. I kept my voice low. Why are you in my room? His eyes flashed. Because I'm not stupid. The internet has been weird. Dad changed passwords. Suddenly the technician shows up. That's not random. I tilted my head slightly like I was curious. Do you want to tell me something? He stared at me and for a second, I saw the old Sterling, the kid who used to ask me for help with homework. Then it vanished, replaced by something defensive and sharp. You think you're better than me? He spat. I let a beat of silence stretch between us. I spoke softly. No, I think I'm tired. His jaw clenched. Whatever. He turned to leave, then paused at the door and said, almost casually, by the way, Wilder said you've been acting weird. My blood ran cold, but my face didn't move. Wilder? I repeated. Sterling's eyes flicked away just for a second. Yeah, you know, he was over. He saw you looking at the router stuff. There it was. A slip. A tiny, careless admission. He knew Wilder had been near the router. He knew enough to use Wilder's name like it was normal. I nodded slowly. Okay. Sterling stared at me, waiting for me to react. I didn't. I just watched him like he was a stranger who'd wandered into my house and forgotten. He could be held accountable. He left my room with an angry exhale, and the moment his footsteps faded, I flipped my phone over and opened the camera feed. The recording from last night was saved. Wilder's face, Sterling's hands, my name on that screen. Greer's voice echoed in my head. Evidence doesn't care who's charming. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't argue with him. I opened a new folder and labeled it with one word. Proof. I backed everything up twice. Once to a private drive Sterling didn't know existed, and once to Greer, because Greer was the kind of person who treated secrets like locked drawers. Then I did something that felt almost like betrayal, even though I was the one being betrayed. I printed it. The screenshots, the login history, the provider's notes, the still frames from the camera footage where Wilder's face was clear, the clip where Sterling's hand hovered over the router cabinet while my name sat on his screen like a stolen jacket. I held the papers in my hands and felt my pulse thudding in my wrists. Paper was old-fashioned, but paper couldn't be deleted with one angry click. Paper couldn't be accidentally wiped in the middle of the night. Sterling tried to act normal for 2 days. Too normal. He joked with my mom. He offered to take the trash out. He even said in a voice sweet enough to make my skin crawl, "Hey, Lorelai, you good? You seemed stressed." I smiled back. "I'm good." He watched me, searching my face for cracks. He didn't find any, because I refused to give him a single one. Inside, though, I felt like a wire pulled tight. Fear and rage and humiliation were all braided together. I kept seeing that loan email like a stain that wouldn't wash out. On the third day, a letter arrived. It was addressed to me, but the envelope had been steamed open and resealed crookedly. My stomach sank. I carried it upstairs to my room and shut the door with a soft click, then opened it with shaking fingers. It was a pre-approval offer. Nothing official, but it confirmed something I didn't want confirmed. Someone had put my information into a system. Someone was phishing. Someone was testing what they could get away with. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the paper until my eyes burned. Shame wrapped around my throat. The shame of being targeted in my own home. The shame of realizing my brother didn't see me as a sister, but as a resource. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Greer. "I found something. Call me." When I called, Greer didn't sound panicked. She sounded calm in the way that meant she'd already made decisions. "I checked public records," she said. "Wilder's older cousin has a history. Fraud, stolen accounts, stuff like that. Small time, but it escalates." My mouth went dry. "So Wilder isn't just some kid." "No," Greer replied. "And Sterling isn't just playing around. He's in someone's orbit now." I swallowed hard. "What do I do?" "You keep doing what you're doing," she said. "Quiet, clean, professional, and you stop trying to protect the feelings of people who didn't protect you." That hit me so hard I had to close my eyes, because the truth was I'd been protecting my parents from pain. I'd been protecting Sterling from consequences. And in exchange, nobody had protected me from losing my job, my credit, my name. That night, I asked my parents if we could have dinner together. Just us. No phones, no TV. My mom looked surprised, but she smiled. "Of course, honey." My dad nodded. "Sounds good." Sterling tried to avoid it. He made a show of being busy upstairs, then came down late, acting annoyed, like family time was something we were forcing him to endure. We sat at the table with plates of food cooling in front of us. Sterling slouched in his chair, tapping his foot, eyes drifting toward the hallway like he wanted to escape. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I did exactly what Greer would do. I asked one small question. "Dad," I said casually, "when the technician came, did he mention remote access?" My dad frowned. "Yeah, he said it was enabled, that it shouldn't be." Sterling's fork froze for half a second, then he scoffed. "Can we not talk about boring router stuff at dinner?" I kept my tone gentle. "It matters." My work calls were dropping, and I got a loan verification email. Someone used my information. My mom's face changed instantly. "What? Lorelai, why didn't you tell tell me that? Sterling laughed sharp. It's spam, Mom. She's overreacting. I looked at him calm and said, maybe. But the provider confirmed admin logins from an Ethernet-connected laptop, and there was an extra cable under the rug. My dad's eyes went to Sterling. Slowly, like his brain was catching up to what his gut had already suspected. Sterling's voice got louder, more defensive. So what? You think I'm some criminal now? I nodded once, like I understood his feelings, and said, I don't think I know what I saw. His eyes narrowed. What you saw? I reached beside my chair and placed a thin folder on the table. Paper on wood. A soft sound. A final sound. I've been documenting it, I said quietly. My mom's hand flew to her mouth again. The same gesture as before. But this time there was something else in her eyes. Not just shock, betrayal. Sterling's face went pale. My dad opened the folder, and as he read, his expression hardened. The way his jaw tightened. The way his lips pressed into a line. It scared me more than Sterling ever did. Because my dad wasn't dramatic. He was controlled. And now his control was being used for something serious. Sterling stood up so fast his chair scraped. This is insane. You're spying on me? My voice stayed even. I put a camera by the router because someone was changing passwords and using my name. My dad looked up. Sterling, sit down. Sterling didn't. He pointed at me like I was the problem. She's making this up. She's always hated me. My mom whispered, stop. I slid my phone across the table and played the clip. No sound, just video. Sterling's hand, Wilder's face, the router cabinet, the laptop screen with my name. The room went so quiet I could hear the refrigerator hum. Sterling's mouth opened, then closed. His eyes darted to my parents, searching for an escape route. He didn't find one. My dad's voice was low, almost calm. Who is Wilder? Sterling's throat bobbed. He's nobody. My mom's voice cracked. Why is he in our house at night? Sterling's eyes flicked to me, and for a moment I saw real panic. Not anger, not attitude, panic. He's just helping me, he said quickly. It's not like that. My dad leaned forward. Then explain why your sister got a loan verification email. Sterling's breathing got faster. I didn't do that. I swear, that wasn't me. I watched him, not with rage, with clarity. This was my first micro twist, and it hit like ice water. Sterling wasn't the mastermind. He was the door. And behind that door was someone else. I said softly. Then who did? Sterling swallowed. His eyes flicked down. Wilder said it was harmless. He said it was just to test stuff. He said it was like a project. A project that used my name, I replied. My dad stood up. Give me your phone. Sterling shook his head, backing up. No, that's mine. My dad's voice sharpened. Now! Sterling bolted. He didn't run out of the house. He ran upstairs. The sound of his footsteps pounding the stairs lit something primal in me. Fear flared hot. Not because I thought he'd hurt me physically, but because I knew what he was going for. My room, my laptop, my proof. I moved fast, faster than I thought I could. I followed him, heart punching against my ribs. My parents were behind me, my mom calling his name. My dad's voice like thunder. Sterling slammed my door and tried to lock it, but my lock was old. It stuck. He cursed, and that single second was enough. I shoved the door open, and I saw him at my desk, hands on my laptop. Trying to yank the power cord like that would erase everything. I didn't scream. I didn't grab him. I stepped forward, calm as glass, and said, it's already backed up. He froze. His eyes met mine, and in that moment, something in him collapsed because he realized he couldn't control the story anymore. My dad grabbed his wrist and pulled him away from my desk. Sterling fought for a second, then stopped, shoulders sagging, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. My mom was crying quietly. Not loud, just tears sliding down her cheeks like she didn't even have energy for sobs. I felt numb, not because I didn't care, but because my body had been on high alert for so long, it didn't know how to be anything else. My dad said, sit. Sterling sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor. My dad looked at me. Call the police. My stomach flipped. Dad, he shook his head once. No, this is identity theft. This is serious. If we don't handle it right, it follows you. Not him, you. Sterling flinched at that, and that was my second micro twist. My dad wasn't going to protect Sterling from consequences. He was going to protect me from damage. I called the non-emergency line, hands steady somehow. I explained that someone had accessed our network, that my identity had been used, that we had evidence. I didn't dramatize. I didn't embellish. I stayed factual, like I was reading a report. When the officers arrived, they were professional and calm. They asked questions. They took notes. They asked to see the footage and the prints. They asked for the provider history. They asked for Sterling's phone. Sterling tried one last time. I didn't mean it, I swear. I didn't even know he was doing that part. One of the officers looked at him and said something that made my throat tighten. Intent doesn't erase impact. They asked for Wilder's information. Sterling gave it up with a trembling voice. Then the officer asked me if I wanted to file a formal report. My mom's eyes begged me not to. My dad's eyes told me to do it. Sterling's eyes were empty. I thought about my job. I thought about that frozen video call. I thought about the shame of seeing my name used like a tool. I thought about the way he'd laughed at me upstairs while I tried to keep my life from falling apart. And I remembered Greer's words, stop protecting the feelings of people who didn't protect you. So I said, yes. The next few weeks were brutal in a quiet way. Sterling wasn't arrested that night, but the investigation moved fast. The provider gave logs. The officers followed the trail. Wilder stopped showing up at school after the first call. Then one afternoon, a different car pulled into our driveway. Wilder's mother, she stood on our porch with red eyes and a tight mouth, holding a small envelope. She didn't apologize the way people do when they mean it. She apologized the way people do when they're scared. She handed the envelope to my dad. Inside were 2 cashier's checks, written out for the exact amount of charges that had appeared on our internet account, along with a note that said Wilder would make it right if we let it go. My dad didn't even blink. He tore the note in half and said, "No." Wilder's mother's face twisted. "You're ruining his life." My voice came out calm, quiet, and sharp. He tried to ruin mine. She stared at me like she'd never considered that a life like mine could be ruined too. Then she left. Sterling moved like a ghost after that. He didn't stream. He didn't laugh. He barely spoke. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me from the hallway, eyes hollow, like he didn't recognize the version of me that had stopped bending. I didn't gloat. I didn't punish him loudly. I simply removed his access. My dad changed the router password again, and this time Sterling never got it. My parents set boundaries they should have set years ago. Sterling had to earn back trust in slow, boring steps, the way real accountability works. And I did something else. I moved out. Not in anger. Not in chaos. Quietly. With boxes and lists and a lease signed in my own name. My own name protected. On my last night in that house, I sat on the floor of my empty room and listened to the silence. No shouting through vents. No hidden cables under rugs. No buzzing alerts that made my stomach drop. Just quiet. My phone buzzed with one final notification from my credit monitoring service. Attempt blocked. Someone had tried again, and it failed. I stared at the screen and felt a cold, steady satisfaction settle in my chest. Not joy, not relief, power, because the last twist was this. It wasn't Sterling who tried again. It was Wilder's older cousin reaching for the same door, only to find it locked, sealed, and watched. And for the first time in months, I smiled without forcing it, because they couldn't use my name anymore. Not after I taught my own house what consequences sound like.